we have arrived in the happinesses. Whenever I teach emotions, I never start with happiness. And you can argue with me about that. But the reason I don't start with happiness is because everybody's connected to happiness, right? When I ask people in workshops, name some positive emotions, and all of the names are in the happiness category, happiness, contentment, or joy, all of them. And I say name some negative emotions, and it's all the other emotions. So if we look at this emotions as being in 4 categories, the happinesses, the fears, the angers, and the sadnesses, right? If we look at it as a pie, this positive and negative emotion nonsense means that we only feel comfortable in 25% of the emotions. If we were grading on a 100% scale, 25% wouldn't even be an F. It would be like a negative F minus minus minus, right? It would be nothing. To know 25% of a thing is to know almost nothing. So this negative versus positive emotion idea is a way to guarantee that you will never learn how to work with emotions. Because if you think of an emotion as positive, you're going to want to have it all the time, regardless of whether it's even remotely appropriate to do so. And if you think of an emotion as negative, which almost every other emotion besides the happiness is thought of as negative, then you're not going to want to work with it at all. I don't want to have a negative emotion. Who would want that, right? So getting rid of this idea of positive and negative emotions is the most important thing to do to develop any level of emotional awareness or skill. So I start with the other emotions, the ones that nobody wants to hear about, as a tactic. It's a gambit. And I end with the happinesses, and I talk about the problems with the happinesses. We all know the good parts, right? They got songs, they got movies, happinesses have everything. And so we all know the good parts. But the problems with happinesses, people don't talk about, or they're not very aware of. Because they don't want to be. Because how can a positive emotion be negative? Well, first of all, don't see them that way. How can any emotion be supportive? How can any emotion be problematic? That's the question to ask. Not whether the emotion itself is all good or all bad. It's silly. It's a silly way to look at emotions. But most people do. So, are people silly? Yes, they are. Okay. The happinesses. I look at happinesses in 3 different categories. All of the happinesses as a larger category are about hope, satisfaction, confidence, and inspiration. They're about laughter, They're about having fun. Happinesses are awesome. And so are angers, and so are fears, and so are sadnesses, each in their place, each in their time, each in their appropriate moment. Right? So the happinesses that I look at, and these are the language of emotion cards, are happiness, contentment, and joy. And I'll talk about the difference between these 3. Happiness is about looking forward and having fun and hope. Contentment is about looking inward. You did an awesome job. I know, right? It's about being proud of yourself appropriately. And joy is about this. It's this big, open, expansive emotion of like pulling the whole world in. It's like if you go to your favorite place in the world and you just, there's a sunset and a rainbow and dolphins, and it's the ocean or something, and everything's beautiful. This is joy. It's like, wow, it's like this amazing experience, and you breathe in the sunset, and your whole life is changed in that moment. Joy is brilliant, and there's problems with joy, right? So in this video, we're going to look at happiness. And I'm not going to be like Debbie Downer. But happiness is a beautiful, wonderful, lovely, brilliant, delicious emotion, and so is anger, and so is jealousy, and so is panic, and so is depression. They all have their place. Happiness, I call it sort of anticipation and possibility. It's about looking forward. The gifts are merriment, gaiety, amusement, hope, delight, wonder, playfulness, and invigoration. That's a great thing, right? The internal statement, there's really not questions to ask for happiness. It's more like thank you. I'll just feel the happiness. Thank you for this lively celebration. This is awesome. I like this. Now, some people might question happiness. Why are you so happy? There's nothing to be happy about. I would suggest not doing that. I would say instead, all of a sudden this happiness overtakes you. You're like, I don't know why that happened, but I'm willing to accept it, right? For a lot of people, they would also chase after happiness. I just want to feel happy. So depression comes up and tells them what you're doing isn't going to work and it's never going to work. I'm going to take your energy away. They want to go to happiness. I want to be happy again. And happiness is sitting there in the emotional realm going, wait a minute, there's nothing to look forward to. Why are you here? This is inappropriate. But then happiness has to go and do its job. Let me dance, like a circus pony, right? Happiness has its place. And in many situations, there isn't a place for happiness. Let's say you just lost your job and it is time for some anxiety because there's things that you're going to need to do in the future. Sadness, maybe grief because you didn't have a choice. And you may need to cry, you may need to process it, you may need to feel the anger, the jealousy, the envy. Why did that person get to keep their job? I trained that person. Do you know what I'm saying? You deal with the emotions that are happening. And happiness may stand way in the back of the psyche and say, there's nothing really to look forward to right now. It's not time for me to be here, right? It's not appropriate for me to be forward in the psyche and, making a little happy dance. It's not appropriate right now. This person needs to feel the loss of this job and the trouble. And then the next day you wake up and you might realize, you know what, I hated that job. I really don't like how they let me go, but that job was terrible. And the person that I trained, they promoted them above me. The job was terrible. And your happiness would be like, I'm free. I'm a little bit free. I can come out now, right? There might be a better job, right? And then the happiness might recede when anxiety comes out and goes, oh my gosh, we've got to put the resumes out again. And I've got to network. Do you know what I mean? So happiness would come up when it's appropriate if you know what your emotions are for and how they work. Now, if you don't know what happiness is for, if you don't know when it's appropriate, if you're in that really unhelpful positive emotion behavioral nonsense, you're going to want to have happiness all the time. You're going to want to be like, it's all good. I'm looking at the future. I feel so much gratitude. Everything's wonderful. I don't have to work with any other emotion. What can happen with people, and that would be called an unbalanced positive outlook. You can have a too positive outlook. What happens for people with a too positive outlook, too much happiness, that is inappropriate, is that they tend not to plan well for the future because why should you plan? It's all good, right? They tend not to understand their own limitations. What limitations? I can do anything I put my mind to, right? And they may spend a lot of time in an area where they don't actually have any skill, right? And move out of the way. Let the people who actually know what they're doing in here, and their happiness is like, well, they're awesome too. So happiness isn't, I didn't mean to make happiness look like it was an ignoramus, right? But happiness has a place. When there's something to look forward to, when there's something awesome happening, then happiness is great. But if you try to have happiness in the place of other appropriate emotions, you're going to veer off because there's not going to be anything keeping you on the path saying, wait a minute, you don't have skills in acting. Why are you suddenly opening an acting school? There's nothing in you that could hold you back, right? So a too positive outlook is just as problematic as a too negative outlook where, you're in depression all the time. Depression has a purpose. Depression has a job. And it shouldn't be on all the time, just as happiness shouldn't be on all the time. Learning to work with the happiness is about learning balance and learning where they're appropriate. So that when your happiness comes up and it goes, yay! And you can just look at it and go, happiness, you're awesome! And your happiness goes, yay! And then it goes and does something else, right? And then your sadness comes through and says, is there anything that needs to be let go of? We talked about sadness in previous weeks. And your jealousy and envy come through and say, okay, is loyalty and love available? Is everything fair? All right, that's good too, right? The emotions should have freedom to move and work in your psyche, right? And do what they need to do without some weird idea that you only need to have one of your 17 emotions working at any given time. It's gonna end up taking you in directions you don't need to go, and your other emotions could have said, well, I could have told you that. Had you listened, had you even known what I was about, I could have told you that wasn't going to work. And they might be like that. I could have told you. Because if emotions are overused and abused in the way that many people abuse happiness, the rest of your emotional realm is going to be pretty miserable and pretty dysfunctional. So focusing too much on happiness would be like focusing too much on sadness. What about if you were in sadness all the time? You would know there's a problem with that. Why don't we see it with happiness? It's because happiness is portrayed, or the happinesses are portrayed as the only emotions worth having, the positive ones. And this causes a tremendous amount of problems. It causes a tremendous amount of ignorance and emotional incapacity, right? So welcome your happiness. It is an awesome emotion, just as anger, just as shame, just as fear, just as panic are in their own time and place. Welcome your happiness. It's a lovely emotion. It's about merriment, gaiety, wonder, delight, playfulness, laughter. It's an awesome emotion when it's time. And one of the big tricks with all of the happiness-based emotions is enjoy them while they're here, thank them, and let them go until it's time for them to come up again, until it's appropriate for them to be here. Welcome, happiness. Now go on your way. I will not imprison you. Thank you. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.